Hello and welcome to this video about the Supreme Court of the United States. Today we'll be discussing the most important decisions by the Supreme Court and if it's an effective institution in addressing important issues. Here are some of the Supreme Court's most important decisions that have impacted American government and society. These decisions are important because they set the precedent for future case rulings. Beginning with some cases in the category of religious freedom. The U.S. is founded on freedom of religion, but this came into question in Employment Division versus Smith, or better known as the Peyote case. The Supreme Court had decided to not protect members of the Native American Church, and this weakened the Sherbert test. And the Sherbert test basically outlines the standards for governments to be able to constitutionally limit a religious practice. So, in response, Congress passed the Religious Freedoms Act, and many states have since included the Sherbert test in state law so that a case such as this could not repeat itself. Another impactful case on religious rights is Burwell versus Hobby Lobby. In this case, the Supreme Court recognized that businesses have the right to not provide free contraception on religious grounds. So this set a precedent for corporations to challenge laws based on religious freedom. Now onto the topic of freedom of speech, another cornerstone of the U.S.'s identity. In a case Neer versus Minnesota, the Supreme Court ruled that censorship is unconstitutional unless in rare cases. This meant the content of press could not be regulated by Congress or states. The case created the foundation for the freest press in the world. Hate speech, although, is an exception to America's freedom of expression. The Supreme Court has allowed bans against threatening symbolic hate speech. For example, in the case RAV versus City of St. Paul, it was ruled unconstitutional that a white teenager burned a cross on an African American's lawn. The Supreme Court has made some impactful decisions on elections. One that stands out is Buckley versus Vallejo, in which the Supreme Court ruled that limits cannot be placed on money spent by individuals and organizations during the election. In contrast to Canada, which has limits on the amount spent on a campaign, U.S. Congress members spend much of their time fundraising because the candidate with the biggest war chest has the better chance of winning. This Supreme Court decision has allowed Congress to become somewhat of a fundraising regime. Shelby County versus Holder is another important case for elections. The Supreme Court ruled that states do not need federal approval to change laws and policies related to voting. This has allowed states to practice voter discrimination. The Supreme Court has set global standards for legal rights of the accused with their rulings in these three cases. Mapp versus Ohio set the standards for search and seizure laws. Gideon versus Wainwright set the standard for granting everybody with a government-provided lawyer if needed. And Miranda versus Arizona granted the right to remain silent. The Supreme Court often contributes to social change. Here are just two examples of impactful cases. First, Brown versus the Board of Education ended segregation by integrating public school. This decision was important to the civil rights movement and attempted to mend racial divides. A more recent example is Obergefell versus Hodges, in which the Supreme Court made same-sex marriage legal across the United States and overturned state bans against it. A debate that spans many categories is abortion. Abortion issues in the Supreme Court are often brought to the attention of the media, especially since it illustrates the divide between Republican and Democrat elected justices. For example, the case presented earlier, Burwell versus Hobby Lobby, was ruled by a conservative majority Supreme Court, and that was what allowed corporations to opt out of providing contraception on grounds of religious beliefs. In the case of Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court ruled that The right to privacy included the right to terminate pregnancy, and this positioned the Supreme Court as the decider of what is right in regards to abortion. So this was a very important case. But some of the rights granted in this case were weakened by the Webster versus Reproductive Health Services and Planned Parenthood versus Casey cases, in which it was ruled that there can be state discretion on the right to abortion. So this means a state can mandate counseling before you get an abortion, that you have to view the ultrasound, or there could be some funding regulations on the clinics. And so because of this, the debate still continues on abortion in the Supreme Court. So after looking at all these cases, we are wondering, is the Supreme Court effective at addressing important issues in American government and society? Well, to start, the Supreme Court is a political entity that is not completely neutral. It does depend on the justices' commitments to not being polarized between Democrats and Republicans. This is especially hard, though, because there's an ongoing dispute over the interpretation of the Constitution, which means there is constant litigation against Supreme Court rulings, simply based on different interpretations, which is very much divided liberal and conservative. The issue of using justices as a political tool is well illustrated by Trump's recent nomination of Amy Coney Barrett. So the Republican Party has used religious justices as a method of defending religion in the US since the church and state are separated. And Amy Coney Barrett is the perfect example because she is a religious justice appointed by Republicans. We can probably assume that she's going to be pro-life and take a pro-life stance. This will be a very large political statement and big for Republicans. And Trump's rush to have her appointed just really illustrates the gravity of having a Supreme Court dominated by Republicans in a 6-3 divide. It is a fairly big difference, and I think we'll see a lot of impact from the Supreme Court's balance in American politics. In conclusion, the Supreme Court is effective at addressing important issues, but the polarization of American government and society is, of course, seeping into the Supreme Court.